Hello, everyone. My name is Ashok Krish, and I'm the Global Head for Digital Workplace for TCS. And welcome to the TCS Innovation Forum breakout session, The Great Work Reset. We have a fantastic panel today. I will be moderating this. We have Peter Verghese, Chancellor of the University of Queensland, Alison Murner, Chief People Officer of Endeavour Group, Ilaria Chan, Chairperson of Tech for Good Institute, founded by Grab, and Satyajit Deshpande, Divisional Vice President for Enterprise Architecture and Application Services for Singapore Airlines. This is a very unique time, the Great Work Reset. It seems to be that we're at an inflection point in terms of not just the definition of a workplace. You know, we're all working from home. Some of us are working from offices. We're clearly in a hybrid world, but also the fundamental definition of work itself, and therefore, by extension, the redefinition in terms of what we expect from talent in the digital world that we live today. The pandemic clearly seems to have accelerated a lot of the trends that were already in motion prior to this, and increasingly, companies are being differentiated on the basis of employee experience as much as customer experience. This means the interplay of technology, the interplay of culture, and also the rethinking of corporate strategies in the world that we live in as we navigate a world that is shifting from a 9-to-5 physically co-located work to a virtually co-located, shall we say, asynchronous modes of working, if you will. We have a fantastic panel, and I'm going to jump straight into our experts. And then at the end, try and sort of synthesize some of the ideas that come from our panel. So I'm going to go straight to Ilaria, who is the chairperson of Tech for Good Institute, founded by Grab. Hi, Ilaria. So I'm going to get straight into a question for you. Grab touches many lives in the ASEAN region as this region looks at recovering from COVID as we get out of the pandemic, and also the wave of digitization in that region. Digital talent development and upskilling is a crucial thing, right? Given the intense war for digital talent. How does Grab view this changing landscape of digital talent in the ASEAN region?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, TCS, for having me. Thank you, Ishak. What an honor to be here at such an interesting time. I love how you guys pick the title Reset, because Reset shows, on one hand, something may be crashing, but on the other hand, there's a rebirth of something else. And when I think about digital talent landscape in Southeast Asia, I will say there's missing potential, but there are also very important gaps that need to be bridged. Now, let's very quickly look at the macro landscape first. In ASEAN right now, there is a surge in internet and mobile users, and we're looking at being able to add as much as $1 trillion to regional GDP over the next 10 years. And if we look at pre-COVID estimates that were more stable, this region actually has higher GDP growth than China in Southeast Asia, with over 3/5 of the region age under 30. They're tech savvy, they're hungry to consume, and we have over 120% mobile penetration and around 670 million people, which is double that of America right now. So the potential is just immense in Southeast Asia, and it's just beginning to unleash. Let's look at the good stuff first. We see a lot of great work of startups, tech companies coming out in the region. If we focus on the office tech job space, right, we see the birth of homegrown firms such as Gojek, such as us, Grab, C Group, etc. And we've also attracted wonderful global tech firms such as Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. to establish their bases here in Singapore and in other countries in Southeast Asia. So what we're getting is like a great mix of talent that are collaborating, cross-pollinating, learning from each other, and actually solving very localized issues on the ground in order to have relevant products to innovate. I'm currently dialing in from San Francisco in Silicon Valley, and many years ago, they named this term called PayPal Mafia here, which are PayPal alums that have gone on to start their own very successful companies such as LinkedIn, such as Tesla, such as Yelp. And right now, I'm actually hearing the same kind of terminologies used about Southeast Asian startups, like the Gojek Mafia, Grab Mafia, C Group Mafia. So I find that very, very encouraging about what is telling us about talent growing in this region. Now, that's the office tech job space, but I am super excited too about the talent in the gig economy worker space, especially how they participate in digital economy and also with the upskilling potential in this group of people. Because let me start by telling you a very quick story of this guy called Farhan, to be an aerospace testing inspector and oil and gas also as an inspection specialist, but then got laid off during COVID, became a Grab driver and delivery person. And he came across one of our programs in Grab Academy and joined an 8-month program to learn software development. And guess what? He's now a junior software engineer at Grab. So that's just one story out of millions of how people can actually upskill, transform themselves, move into a different sector, and because they have great talent access and digital education access. So I will wrap this point up in saying that the new digital economy has empowered and uplifted so many in Southeast Asia, but we have to also recognize that with all these opportunities, there's still imbalance in skills and access in digital literacy and economic opportunities as a result, because 30% of Southeast Asians still are not online, despite over 120% mobile penetration, as I said just now. So this large gap, especially between urban and rural areas, must be addressed by both public and private sectors. So I'll wrap up my point here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lariat. I think that was very, very insightful. I mean, I think, the sheer size and scale of that region, the opportunities there, and the opportunities for this new wave of people who might start in the gig economy. But as we get to a world where even software and those kinds of jobs are also getting into the gig economy as that's changing, and we'll explore that a little bit more. So I'm going to get to Alison here for our next question here. Clearly, I think we spoke about how the talent landscape itself is fundamentally changing. Right? One of the things that remote work and all companies forced to embrace hybrid ways of working over the last year and a half or so has, on the one hand, enabled greater flexibility. It has enabled people to work in more of a continuous partial attention mode, not necessarily in just a 9-to-6 mode. It's therefore enabled a lot of companies, particularly even like us, to embrace a more diverse workforce as well, as location is not a barrier anymore. And yet remote working has also posed uniquely new challenges in engaging employees and attracting and retaining this kind of highly in-demand digital talent, if you will, right? So I want to sort of, could you share your thoughts on this sort of rapidly evolving world of human resources, particularly in the context of talent and the future of work?
Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me come today. And again, just reflecting what Ilaria said, it is a fascinating time actually to be involved in looking at what we can do and how we can really take advantage of the particular opportunities that in many respects the pandemic has provided. And I think, as you talked about, whilst there was a lot of things that have become very challenging through the pandemic, the opportunity to remote work has been fascinating. If I just reflect on the particular challenges we were having from a talent perspective pre-pandemic, in particular being able to maintain and attract key female talent within our organization, it was very hard because of the lack of flexibility. And if I think about how quickly we've accelerated that, one of the critical components now that we have is this ability to offer flexibility as a true way to attract and retain talent. And we've really seen that through the sort of the diverse talent that we're now getting as a result. So it's really critical as we think about the future with talent. How do we take the best of what I consider to be remote working, becoming hybrid working, and yet still trying to tackle some of the challenges that we know about creating a sense of connection and belonging for people? If I think about talent also from a remote working perspective, I think as you touched on, what it has done is open up access to talent. There was this old paradigm where people needed to go to a particular location, to move to a particular city to be able to access the work. We now need to think about talent in a completely different way. We need to go where the talent is. And I think, again, this remote working has enabled us to really open up the opportunity to find talent, whether it be nationally, whether that be internationally, and really maximize the way that we can work in a digital way to really help us drive the sort of growth that we need as an organization. So that is, again, a real opportunity, as long as we embrace that, to attract and retain the types of talent that we're going to need both now and into the future. And in many respects, I think the other part that I think has been sort of quite key is, you know, it really has become a bit of a leveler working from, you know, a remote location. Everyone is basically seen to be on a screen. There isn't that sort of, you know, hierarchy that existed with some of the old mentalities with offices and who had the corner office, etc. It really has opened up a way of sort of connecting, I think, in a more authentic way. We do see families pop up on screen, whether it be pets, whether it be the washing, whatever it might be, but we are able to connect in quite a different way. But it has proven to that point to still be a bit of a challenge, where people through the pandemic have really thought about, how can we connect? Because it has been challenging. And people have probably had their lives turned upside down. They've really started to think about, how do they find much more meaning in what they do? And I think, again, this has proven to be quite a challenge for organisations, but it's also, again, an amazing opportunity. And if I think about being a purpose-driven organisation, it becomes so much more relevant now, even though it was key before, to really help both individuals who work with an organisation as well as the organisation itself find that way to contribute more broadly. We know that culture and having a sense of belonging is one of the key components to attract talent. And so we're sort of really thinking about, how do we bring our purpose to life, both in terms of being able to connect in a more hybrid way, but in particular to create alignment across locations, to devolve and enable quicker decision making. Because if people understand why an organisation exists, how they can contribute to that, then they can certainly make that difference in being able to feel like they're finding that purpose that they need. And I think as a result, if you can create that culture via the purpose that you have as an organisation, you will be able to really have a point of differentiation within the market, and it will ultimately have a critical role to play, I guess, in attracting and retaining that talent. So for us, it's something that we're still working through. We've got to think about the different ways to be able to bring that to life. And it does happen each and every day with what you do. And it needs to be able to, I guess, transcend both the remote working as well as being more deliberate about why might people come together, the connection that they have, and how they feel that they can contribute.
I think that's super insightful. Thank you, Alison. And it sort of reminds me of this recent book called Donut Economics that I read by Kate Raworth. And she kind of says that the kind of companies that will attract the best talent, employees will be asking 4 kinds of questions. And the first of which is, what is the purpose of the organization? Is it selfish, or is it a community or a larger purpose than just the selfish need to make a profit? And then there is the, what's the ownership structure? How is it run? And how are decisions made? And so I think it's now a new playbook, if you will, in a world where talent has all of these opportunities and the ability to work remotely for anyone, you know, as part of what we call the talent cloud. And I think it's the perfect segue into my next question to Peter, that all of these changes, clearly, I think, you know, one is that many of these changes were in the minds of boardroom executives even before the pandemic. These were all trends that we've been seeing over the last decade, particularly accelerated in the last 4 or 5 years. These were already in motion, the impact of digital technologies on business models, and therefore the appropriate operating models and the talent required to really execute on this. So the new priorities of the boardrooms, and therefore the pressures on universities to deliver the kind of talent and keep themselves relevant, right? So I think, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on both the sort of spectrum from the boardroom to the university in terms of where you see these changes happening.
Well, thank you very much, Ashok. And can I also thank TCS for the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. So look, I think where work goes, so also universities need to go. I think that nexus is very clear. And as you suggest, what COVID has done has accelerated a number of trends that I think were obvious to those who sit on the boards of universities for some time. I think we're now dealing with a different environment, a different set of expectations, and therefore we will need to sort of adjust our operating model accordingly. I mean, students these days, I think, are much more interested in self-curating their qualifications, by which I mean They want systems where they can mix and match. They want to be able to put together subjects, but also disciplines that are of particular interest to them. And overall, I think that's going to be quite a positive development, because one thing that is very apparent is we live in an extraordinarily complex ecosystem. And so anything which helps us navigate interconnections across subjects and disciplines, I think, will only help us as members of the workforce. I think the other thing which is surprising, at least to someone of my generation, is that there is a real interest among students to develop entrepreneurial skills. And I'm not talking here about students who are just doing business or commerce degrees. I mean, the interest in entrepreneurial skills applies virtually across the board at universities, and that means that we are going to have to respond to that. Obviously, digital literacy is a foundation stone now of education. And so anyone going through the university system is going to have to be adept at the ability to work with and navigate the digital economy. I think another trend which is going to be accelerated is this whole concept of lifelong learning. I mean, the truth is, the idea that you could go to university fresh out of high school, stay there for 4 or 5 years, and that's all the education you need for your entire working life, it was probably never valid, but it is completely invalid these days. So I think universities are going to be looking to do much more short courses to give people the opportunity to refresh professional skills, to recognize that the shelf life of professional skills is getting shorter and shorter. So that focus on short courses is going to change. And of course, the whole online technology has very profound implications for universities, including, I think, the fact that large tech companies like Google or even TCS, if I may say, could well become competitors for universities in the delivery of education. And so we may well be moving towards a situation where a market accreditation of qualifications over time displaces the monopoly that universities have traditionally had in the issuing of professional qualifications. So all of those, I think, are going to require universities to think a little bit differently, to structure themselves differently. I think we'll end up with a very hybrid system from completely online degrees through to hybrid courses, through to very intensive residential face-to-face campus experiences. There's going to be a niche, I think, for all of those requirements. And all of that, I think, will also require us to have a much closer relationship with the business community. So I think that link between universities and business is going to get stronger, whether it's commercializing our research or whether it's contract researching, but taking maximum advantage of the sunk investment in research infrastructure that most universities represent. So, universities will have to adapt, but I take some encouragement, and I'll end on this more optimistic note. At least in the West, universities are the second oldest continuing institution. So they must have had some gene for adaptation somewhere along the line.
Thank you, Peter. I think that was it was really fascinating. It reminds me of your point about the changing nature of how technology companies might themselves play a significant role in education, particularly in digital dexterity of the population at large. So it's interesting how our philosophy of learning, even within TCS, as we navigated the older world of technology to the digital world of technology, was to essentially talk about just-in-time learning, but not only that, just what you need learning, meaning that in today's world, a lot of skills don't need you to have understand everything from the basics onwards to get to a level of competency. So to build an iPhone app does not require you to understand the guts of the iPhone. On the other hand, the technology in the past was significantly harder to navigate. And so there's this newer trend of just learning just what you need. And it kind of goes with your idea of short shelf life of learning as well. And even in the context of even the talent pool itself, when we as an organization switched to a national entrance test, particularly in India, our talent, as opposed to simply picking from a few universities, our talent pool just expanded by an order of magnitude. And I think that's the kind of world that we live in. So on that note, I think I'm going to switch to Satyajit here from Singapore Airlines. Digital, we've been speaking about talent, we've been speaking about skills required, we've been speaking about digital dexterity, right? Digital has been transforming customer experience for the better part of the last decade. And more importantly, it has also been transforming, albeit in a less recognized fashion, employee experience and the way we work, the productivity tools that we have, the access to knowledge, the decision-making tools, the analytics, and so on. But one thing that the pandemic has particularly highlighted is the underinvestment historically among many companies in the frontline workforce, right? And this is something that's across industries. It's not just the airline industry or the hospitality industry. So as a brand that is particularly known for world-class customer experience and increasingly so for employee experience over the last 4 or 5 years as well, can you talk us through how you guys are thinking about using technology to better enable your frontline workforce, which is amongst your most critical demographic of employees, because they really deliver customer experience for you?
Thanks, Ashok, for the segue, and thanks to TCS for this opportunity to be on this very relevant and topical panel. So as we know, the airline environment poses some unique challenges, since a majority of our workforce is constantly on the go and the office is the aircraft. So obviously working from home is not really an option, right? So when we look at addressing the needs of these frontline staff, especially given this pandemic environment, we look at it from two different perspectives. The first is really a customer lens. How do we reduce the friction for our customers and consequently the overheads for our frontline staff from the evolving health and safety considerations that are ongoing? And the second is an employee lens. How do we reimagine the employee journey to provide them with the right information at the right time so they are able to do their jobs more effectively? And I'll go a little bit into each of those points. So for our customers, we have developed a series of digital solutions across all the touch points in the customer journey that allows passengers to have a greater peace of mind when they travel with us. For example, we have solutions that enable passengers to use their mobile phones to interact with the check-in kiosks, which enable them to e-order their food while they're in the lounge, and also to see the in-flight food and beverage menu in a digital form when they go on board. So that's from the customer perspective. There's a lot more there, but let's pivot back to the employees, right? So for our frontline employees, what they really need is on-the-go, quick and easy access to critical information for their jobs. And when we think about digitalization for them, we think about it in 4 aspects. The first is being employee-centric, and that means understanding the needs of the employee through techniques such as design thinking and journey mapping, which are critical to ensure that we are addressing the most impactful problems. Second is co-creating with the business, so that all the programs are actually business-owned and based on a strong collaboration between business and IT, and helping the business to achieve their goals. The third is an agile-based incremental delivery approach that is founded on a strong test and learn mindset. And finally, is a very strong technology foundation that incorporates sound architectural practices coupled with key technologies such as mobile, cloud, data-driven optimization, and IoT, which enables us to deliver robust, scalable, and secure solutions. So let me bring this together in a concrete example. For our crew and pilots, we have created mobile apps that they can use to access real-time flight information, retrieve essential documents, and perform administrative tasks on their mobile devices. These were co-created with the crew to ensure that they met their needs. Crew can use the apps to manage all aspects of their duty, from accessing their flight rosters anytime, anywhere, to checking in for their flights, accessing the most up-to-date regulatory information, which is really critical in this changing pandemic-driven environment, and even to apply for medical leave when they're sick. The app is automatically integrated with backend systems such as the rostering system, which alerts crew who are on standby in the event that someone falls sick. The standby crew numbers are optimized using an AI-based optimization. The app also incorporates a chatbot that uses natural language processing to help them answer their queries. When the crew get on board, they can use the mobile devices on board to log defects that may happen during their flight. They also have apps that enable them to do better customer servicing when they're on board. Going back to the defects point, when these defects get created, they get synchronized with the ground so that the aircraft engineers on the ground have an early view of what are the kinds of issues that they may have to deal with when the aircraft gets back on ground. So these investments in helping our frontline staff to do their job better has made it more efficient for them and has enabled them to deliver the service excellence and service operation and safe operations that SIA is known for.
Thank you, Satyajit. That was super interesting. And again, if I might sort of, I think one critical point that you made about sort of co-creating with business and historically and the agile culture in how you build applications for the employees, right? Historically, the challenge has always been that you had a world of infrastructure that was all wires and routers and servers and data centers and endpoint devices that needed a fundamentally different way and culture of how you operate and manage them. And the world of application development, which is a completely different world, with far more amenable to agile ways of working and design thinking. And I think the opportunity, and I think Singapore Airlines is one of those companies that has truly started to embrace this, is that the cloud converges these things. You can look at employee experience as a journey because you don't have to look at it as infrastructure or applications. You can start to look at them in an integrated way so that you can actually keep the employee and really reducing their friction in mind, I think. So I'm going to stay with you as we get into our second round of questions on this panel. And I think as someone who is at the forefront of implementing technology, I obviously don't want to diminish that aspect, but it is increasingly evident that implementing new technology in the context of a large enterprise is relatively the easy part. The harder bit is culture change. It's convincing employees to get more digitally dexterous by using the tools that you give them, use them in the right way, collaborate in the right way. And in that sense, also sort of nudge them into cross-skill and upskilling themselves as your business models and your business itself changes as we move to the future, right? And add to this the challenges of having not only a frontline workforce, a critical frontline workforce, but an increasingly large hybrid support ecosystem of employees that you might have. How you integrate a value system of your company in addition to simply the day-to-day use of digital tools and the applications you launch. Sort of wondering how you see these challenges sort of play as you think about the culture change that is sort of enabled by technology.
Thanks, Ashok. I fully agree with you. A sustainable transformation has to go beyond just initiatives and programs and really instill the digital mindset widely and deeply within the organization. And HR's role is critical to make this happen. So looking at ourselves, two of the key elements of our digital transformation strategy are, firstly, cultivating a digital culture, and secondly, building digital capabilities. Let me talk a little bit of both of those points. In terms of digital culture, we adopted a two-pronged approach that looks at both the internal and external facing views from a top-down and a ground-up perspective. This starts with cultivating a digital mindset and encouraging co-innovation amongst employees so we can build a truly digital workforce that is enabled by skills training and continuous learning, like what Peter was alluding to in his talk earlier. We encourage our staff to participate in organization-wide hackathons. So these events help to boost the culture of innovation and learning in a fun and competitive manner. They also promote teamwork and build an entrepreneurial mindset amongst our staff. Also another point that Peter was alluding to when he was giving his views. In terms of digital capabilities, we recognize that our staff is a key part of our journey, and we are investing in them to ensure that they are future ready. We're supporting their development with company-wide training programs in concepts such as agile, lean, data-driven decision-making, and design thinking. And coming back to the context of this topic of the pandemic, in a remote working and hybrid kind of an environment, it's also essential that we upskill our leaders in terms of how do we really effectively manage and lead hybrid teams, and how do we even support the staff on aspects of mental health, something which really as leaders we didn't really have to bother too much with earlier before this whole situation started. And I'd like to reiterate that the success of all of these programs depends critically on a strong partnership between HR and IT, and on a joint focus on building a future-ready organization. It's also essential that our HR services manifest this culture and capabilities by providing a consumer-grade experience to our employees. And with this in mind, we've built an employee-facing app that we call OneSQ internally. It is the go-to channel for the latest company news, employee benefits, and frequently used employee service transactions. And to your point earlier, it was not just about building the app. A significant amount of effort was spent by both the HR and the IT teams in doing the change management, in driving the adoption, in doing the entire advertising and promotion campaigns to ensure that the staff would get excited about the app, they would be enabled through any adversity that they encounter while getting through the process, that they were properly supported when they installed it. And then we even have our own internal Yammer community where staff can post issues that they have, and people will respond to that to say that, why don't you try this to fix these issues yourself? So there was this whole campaign that needed to be surrounded for this digital implementation to ensure its success. And I'm happy to report that through these constant efforts, we've managed to achieve more than a 90% adoption within our staff of this app for all of their needs. So this just goes to show that it's absolutely critical, the collaboration between IT and HR and focusing on the change management and culture aspects is one of the most critical elements of any digital transformation story.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, Satyajit. And actually, on that note, I wanted to get back to Peter. And one of the I know you sort of left on a sort of positive note about many of the points that you made about self-curation, self-learning, sort of intermixing of disciplines, the personalization of how people learn today, and the need for entrepreneurial skills, etc. Right? But I want to sort of slightly put you on the spot and request you to slightly wear a devil's advocate hat, and in essence maybe talk us through. Is it possible to go too far in the entire? Anyone can learn whatever they want. So we've come through a society that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've realized that personalizing everything is not necessarily a great thing. If everybody gets their own news, we have dysfunctional democracies and so on. On that note, on the changing nature of work, do you see any challenges in overcorrecting as universities change themselves to sort of fit this new world? Where should the balance come in, if you will, when we think about letting people learn whatever they want versus shaping certain larger trends and being able to nudge people towards certain directions so that there's a larger societal good that is also being considered. So just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I don't think an education system that's premised on letting people learn whatever they want is going to last for very long. Because at the end of the day, the workforce is still going to need skill sets. Now, what those skill sets are will change over time. And one of the challenges, I think, for education institutions at the moment is that trying to plot or predict the skill sets is probably going to be a mug's game. So what that means is that you need to be focusing on two different types of skill sets. One is the sort of generic skills, the skills that you need to succeed in most workplaces. And a lot of that is going to put more emphasis than it has in the past on soft skills, on the ability to work with people, on emotional intelligence, recognizing that a lot of the sort of grunt work is going to be done in other ways, and probably by technology. But it still is the case that if you want to have doctors or engineers, they're going to have to require a great deal of specialist knowledge, and a university system needs to keep delivering that. So, I think it is difficult to chart work skills in a labour market which is moving in unpredictable directions. But I think if you keep an eye on that combination of generic and professional specific skills, you're more likely to get there than otherwise. And, I think you can over-imagine technology as being the sole platform for the delivery of education. Because what we've found during the COVID period is that while we were able to move all of our courses online, there were a number of things that we simply couldn't do effectively online. Whether that related to laboratory work, whether it related to sort of placements in the health system, whether it related to sort of small group interaction in the humanities. I mean, the dynamic and the quality of discussion and analysis in a small tutorial face-to-face is of a different order to a connection over a Zoom call, for example. So it is important to keep all of that in perspective, and recognizing that at the end of the day, you're still dealing with human beings, and human beings will always, I think, require a personal touch in terms of what they do and how they learn. Interestingly for universities, it's a bit of an intergenerational experiment, because our students who are typically young, not all of them, but most of them are typically young, have a level of comfort in the digital space and in technology, whereas teachers who are often of a different generation have had to make a very radical adaptation to a new environment. And there again, you can see there are going to be built-in constraints to how far and how fast you can go. So I think there will be self-correcting mechanisms that will save us from the sort of brave new world of a completely technology-delivered education.
Absolutely. I think, the points that you make about the kinds of learning that happen best in an in-person environment also remind me of the challenges that companies face with regard to realizing that certain kinds of brainstorming, collective decision-making obviously work better in an in-person environment. I'm reminded of a customer of ours who's a large fashion retailer, and during the pandemic, one of the key tasks is people curating stuff. So they decide from all the dresses that are available, which ones will be available, online or in the store. And they literally had clothes shipped to them so that they could touch and feel. They said there's no way they can do this digitally. They need to touch and feel and hold it in their hands, and while also being able to collaborate with others to get their feel on whether this will work or not. And I think it's as you said, it's a brave new world, and I think we will ultimately figure out what works well remotely in a personalized way, and what requires some amount of standardization, and maybe keeping some of our older ways of in-person collaboration alive as well. So on that note, I do want to sort of get to Alison. And I think you made some fantastic points about diversity, the retention of talent, particularly female talent as well, with the flexibility of work that you're able to offer, and the advantages of remote work in terms of there being no hierarchies. I think it was a very insightful point. And a very critical point that you talked about was on the talent cloud, meaning that the company of the future should be able to hire and onboard and retain talent anywhere in the world, as opposed to just in a location and so on. So I want to sort of extend that a bit and really want to hear your thoughts on, therefore, the changing nature of HR as a function. I recall a conversation I had with the TCS head of talent development about 5 years ago when I asked her what the future of HR was. And she said the future of HR is that there will be no HR department. Everyone will perform HR functions, was what her prediction was 5 years ago. We're sort of keen to hear your thoughts on the changing nature of HR policy making, how function has traditionally been designed, and how it needs to sort of evolve into the future?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think if you traditionally think about how HR has been seen, in some regards, it's sort of reflective to a degree about how the general team have been seen. We're there to work to deliver for the relevant organisation and enable that business to grow, but it's been in those other parts of the business, whether it's operations, whether it's technology, etc., that they've sort of seemed to be the key unlock actually for the organisation. And I think what we can really understand and see now is that the biggest differential for any organisation and for their success are humans. It is the people. And therefore, what role does HR play in actually trying to bring the right level of science, the right level of insight, the right level of connection for the organisation in maximising what is the most critical component of any business? So if I think about the changing nature, I think we were sort of more tasked at times with an administrative function, with a level of partnering, but actually we have a critical role to play in terms of being able to provide the right level of data and insight as it relates to the organisation. How do we take the lessons that have come from thinking about customer experience, as was mentioned earlier, and bringing it into the team experience, but in particular, thinking about how do we get quite specific about what it is that helps those particular individuals connect, understanding where they want to go, creating ways to create the talent, for example, in internal marketplaces. If there's a demand over here, where's the supply? We might have a demand of work, but we need a supply of people. We have a really key role in, I think, orchestrating the talent to both ensure that we can maximise the people that we have, but to very much align it with the strategy that's required. So it's not so much a sitting back and waiting to be told. We very much really need to be leading from the front. And that means that I don't necessarily see that HR will necessarily disappear, but I think the way that we engage, the role that we play, the level of expertise that we can bring to help the organisation is quite different to how it's been in the past. And I think we need to bring ourselves much more into the future as a function in many respects to take advantage of the level of digitisation, the level of data-led analysis that can actually happen. We will have more service designers in our function. We'll have more data-led scientists as part of the people function, similar to what we've seen in the other areas. But actually, if we can really, I think, bring that to life and really start to take the lead in that, we will much more effectively be able to change, I think, the course of the organisation. And if we talk about the biggest concern for businesses today, it is talent. And therefore, what role do we have to play to make sure that we can figure out a raft of different ways, engage with the business and really start to deliver a different experience so that we can maximise people?
I think that was super. Thank you. Thank you, Alison. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that as we start to see HR departments start hiring more data scientists and so on. I recall seeing this advertisement on LinkedIn for a HR department of a larger consumer goods company looking for PhDs in behavioral economics, particularly because they're talking about what we call persuasive design. How can I design policies, talent, employee experience, and all of this to be persuasive so I can nudge employees to be more innovative, to continuously upskill themselves. And I think it's an interesting new world as HR becomes plays this sort of a strategic role as opposed to just an administrative role of just simply managing. Having had its background, if you will, history is the history of HR was founded in managing a labor workforce in a factory, managing unions, managing personnel. So many of those HR degrees used to be called personal management, and so on. They're still masters in personal management. But it's obviously a brave new world. And on that note, I want to get back to Ilaria on essentially, I think, this is as you've heard all our speakers, it's a completely brave new world. A new definition of skills, interdisciplinary skills, digital dexterity, as convergence of things like infrastructure, applications, greater degree of software savviness amongst the population at large. And yet you did speak about the inequalities and the inequities that do still exist and so on. If you could maybe talk us through the opportunities and the challenges for ASEAN companies in particular, particularly in this space of digital talent development, upskilling, hiring, and so on, it would be great.
Of course. And I learned so much from the other fellow speakers, just feverishly taking notes. I'll draw on that point Satya make. You got to make people excited. And he was referring to his employees, but I'll make it general. If you want to have people learn disruptive, different skills that they're normally not used to. Peter talked about the older generation in universities. How do you get them excited and how do you innovate to teach so that they will pivot with you? I mentioned about the gaps just now. So if we look at the challenges too, right, there's the urban-rural divide. And especially in Southeast Asia, if you look at the region, it's an era when people are skipping landlines, they're skipping PCs, and they're leapfrogging straight into mobile tech. So what does that really mean then to really make use and capitalize on that and to have people learn? So I'm going to talk with two perspectives, education, and then how do you have very innovative ways of getting people to learn. So for example, in the past 9 years, Grab as an operating company very deliberately invested into supporting local tower R&D centers and Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and incubating programs through Grab Ventures to help small companies come out and grow, right? And we also work with governments to expand training so that the locals could truly thrive. But for example, in Singapore, we actually identified that a lot of the elderlies are the ones who actually really need digital clinics. So we actually went to them. We went to the local community centers and the elderly neighborhoods in partnership with governments to help the seniors understand how do you use this range of services available, let's say on GrabPay, e-wallet. I'm sure we all have grandmothers or mothers or dads who are kind of like, they look at FaceTime, they're turning the wrong way, they're pressing the wrong button. How do we help them get very comfortable with technology? And you know the result of what I told you just now on these clinics, 4 times greater participation from seniors. So how do we get really smart on helping innovate on how we educate, right? It's really on innovation. So helping a wider community gain new digital skills, make them interested. So we, Grab, have really invested in helping especially our driver partners, our delivery agents, merchants on the platform, because they make up a really large population. They're very important as a backbone to Southeast Asia to help them improve their digital skills level. So I mentioned just now the very inspiring story of Farhan, who was the inspector specialist who became a driver and delivery person who became a software engineer. People like him have really come enthusiastically to sign up for, let's say, Grab. We partner with Microsoft to offer upskilling courses. So over about 250,000 drivers have participated in this course, and we've awarded over 550,000 certificates. I mean, these are pretty staggering numbers within a very short period of time. And we also partner with MasterCard, for example, to offer cybersecurity courses for young girls in Indonesia who normally drop out of the workforce, and to preempt knowing that there's going to be a huge need in cybersecurity in the upcoming years, and then teach them now in advance to prepare them for this brave new world. And we have mentorship apps as well, in partnership also with MasterCard, to help these gig economy workers find direct, instant mentorships, kind of like the Tinder of mentorship, they would like to call it. And I love that kind of innovation. So just to wrap it up, right? If we help the large, whether you're a large corporation or a MSME, a small merchant, we all need that level of localized, hyper-curated digital upskilling. Even lychee farmers, for example, in Vietnam during COVID, have used our apps, and directly we brought them to consumers. And in over 5 days, just over 5 days, we actually placed over 100 tons of lychees for these farmers in Vietnam and eliminated middlemen for them. And a lot of them just used an app for the first time. And they essentially have moved past a lot of the inefficiencies of economics just because they upskilled themselves and took that step into the digital world. So I think the key here is hyper-localized, hyper-curated solutions, focusing on bridging the gap for people out there so that they can stand on their own feet and flourish.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ilaria. I think that's it's been a fantastic panel, we're getting to the end of it. I'm just going to sort of quickly summarize some of the key things that I heard. There's, I'm sure there's lots, pages and pages of notes that you could take. There are sorts of things that stood out to me from this this panel. Clearly, I think the opportunity, the size and scale of the opportunities in the ASEAN region, the 670 million people and a population that is increasingly becoming digitally savvy and looking to really become interdisciplinarily skilled, fiercely entrepreneurial as well, and moving up the chain, if you will. And I think the insights from Alison about the changing nature of HR in terms of redefining the employee experience culture that we need from an HR that was just administrative to an HR that is really about insights, about people insights, about behavior science, and sort of the advantages of both remote work and how it enables a more diverse workplace, a more flexible workplace, and some super insights from Peter, particularly on the changing nature of education to not just be about the specialized skills that will still continue in the traditional way in which we educate people, but also the more self-curating, mix and match, interdisciplinary skills with a strong flavor of entrepreneurial sort of skills plus digital skills that everyone is looking to keep a sort of talent as it sort of goes stale very, very quickly in the changing landscape particularly. And I think particularly the culture of lifelong learning is, I think, a crucial message for a lot of employees in most companies as their business models continuously change. And from Satyajit, clearly, I think the critical point about creating frictionless experiences for employees, right? And we don't realize how much friction there often is in some of our employee journeys, and being employee-centric and really just enabling them to make decisions in the front line, as opposed to sort of always having to sort of defer to someone in a back office, if you will. And also cultivating that digital mindset in employees of constantly upskilling themselves and so on. I could just keep going on, but I will leave you with one interesting thing that I know you will remember: Tinder for mentorship. So on that note, I'm passing you back to Michelle Lemons. Thank you so much, Ilaria, Peter, Satyajit, and Alison, for your fantastic insights. Back to Michelle Lemons.
So let me take a moment to wrap up the overall TCS APAC Innovation Forum sessions today. It's been our great pleasure to bring perspectives on how we can build sustainable futures, more resilient businesses, and future-ready businesses through innovation and collective knowledge. We'd welcome your inputs on the survey you can see, and we look forward to working together with you to turn intent to action and outcomes. Thank you.